Hey, this is Roaming Millennial. Welcome back to my channel. Today we are going to be talking about social justice and why, yes, it really is cancer. And wait, to all you literalists out there, no, I do not think that social justice is actually literally medical cancer, or that it's somehow worse or as bad as cancer. Cancer is still worse than social justice. When I say that social justice is cancer, what I mean is that as a movement, it is extremely harmful and much like a malignant tumor spreading rapidly throughout our culture. It is frustrating that I would even need to explain things like hyperbole and metaphor, but I really do. So in a few of my videos, I've mentioned things like that I'm against social justice, or that I'm not a fan of social justice, or that I'm anti-social justice, and anytime I say something along those lines, I always get a few comments that are really indignant about it, like, "Oh, you're against social justice? Does that mean you're for social injustice?" And yes, in my head, that is exactly how all of my critics sound. You see, a lot of people are under the impression that, even though some initiatives might be a bit extreme, on the whole, social justice is something desirable, something good, something we as a society should be striving for. But to that, I've got to say, I disagree. It's not just the radicals or the extremists within the social justice movement that are the problem, it's the entire movement itself. Social justice as a concept is not compatible with principles like equality, individualism, and liberty. And I know that sounds extreme, and it's not like I think that every social justice warrior out there is some commie jerk, but in this video, I would like to talk about why social justice as an ideology is so very toxic. First, let's get some definitions out of the way just to make sure we're all on the same page. Merriam-Webster defines social justice as a state or doctrine of egalitarianism. And because that definition isn't very useful, dictionary.com also defines it as justice in terms of the distribution of wealth, opportunities, and privileges within a society. Now, to hear the dictionaries define it, social justice actually sounds like a pretty awesome thing, if not slightly ambiguous. I mean, you got words like justice, egalitarianism, what's not to like? But in practice, the term usually applies to leftist authoritarian policies regarding gender, sexuality, and race. Also, being pro-Muslim usually fits into there somehow. For example, social justice classes at universities might include topics like environmental sustainability and social justice, the principles of anti-racism education, racism, violence, and the law, issues for researchers and educators, race, indigeneity, and the colonial politics of recognition, centering indigenous settler solidarity in theory and research, marginality and the politics of resistance, disability studies, an introduction, black feminist thought. There's also something called a master's level indigenous land education and black geography class, as well as a master's level queer studies in education course. And I'm being completely serious. There are actually students out there who are paying money to take these classes, or at least their parents are, or they're going into debt for them. Probably not a very high return on these degrees. So basically, social justice describes the idea that if you are white, male, cisgendered, heterosexual, and from the West, you are privileged and an active oppressor of people who are not in those groups. And that kind of brings us to the first issue I have with this ideology, that it focuses on group identity instead of individualism. Whether it's feminists complaining that women on average don't earn as much as men, or race advocates complaining that there aren't enough people of color visible in the media, all social justice initiatives are the same. They don't focus on who you are, they focus on what you are. While Martin Luther King made the audacious statement that he had a dream, that his 4 little children would one day live in a nation where they would not be judged by the color of their skin, but by the content of their character, modern-day social justice activists have kind of taken the exact opposite approach. You see, through the lens of social justice, the world is not made up of individuals with their own skills and faults and their own backstories and their own struggles that are specific to their situations. Instead, society is made up of distinct groups, and in every instance, one group is the oppressor and another group is the oppressed. Men oppress women, straight people oppress gay people, cisgendered people oppress trans people, white people oppress non-white people, able-bodied people oppress disabled people, native populations oppress immigrants. So if you are a black woman who is transgender, disabled, and gay, you've essentially won the oppression lottery. Essentially, this focus that social justice has on labels means that it lends itself extremely well to identity politics. Whether it's on the left or on the right, I am just not a fan of identity politics. Identity politics try to tell us that different groups have different interests, which I just don't think is true. I think it's safe to say that all people, no matter who they are, want equality, liberty, and opportunities for themselves that doesn't change based on someone's skin color or genitals. And most importantly and worryingly, identity politics also allow for the belief that groups are responsible for the actions of individuals within those groups. This is where we get the ideas in social justice that all white people are responsible for slavery, even though no one in the West alive today who is white has owned a slave, or that all straight people are responsible for marginalizing gay people. Whether they actually do or don't as individuals is irrelevant. I am not a fan of being blamed for actions that aren't my own, nor am I a fan of people assuming my interests based on the way that I look. So no, I'm really not into this whole group label thing. And actually this leads us to my second issue with social justice, which is that it focuses on justice and not equality. Now, as we get into this, I want to be perfectly clear that I am not against the concept of justice. I think our justice system is extremely important for our society to function. However, when the concept of justice is applied to group identities, it can be, as the social justice warriors like to say, problematic. So broadly and conceptually defined, justice has to do with what is just or fair, which doesn't sound like a bad thing. But practically, when we talk about justice, we're talking about the assignment of rewards and punishments. And this concept of rewards and punishments is exactly what we see in many, if not most, social justice initiatives. For instance, affirmative action rewards minority members, and because they don't qualify for it, punishes majority members. Diversity initiatives reward those who are diverse while overlooking those who aren't. Any social justice program that is designed to benefit groups like women or the LGBT+ community, by definition, excludes people who aren't part of those groups. And while those of us who aren't part of social justice ideology might think it really wrong to favor and therefore disfavor certain people based on their gender, sexuality, and race, in the social justice mindset, these rewards and punishments are completely justified because they believe that society rewards and punishes people anyway based on them belonging to oppressed or oppressing groups. If that makes sense. Like, for example, a social justice warrior might think it completely necessary to give a job to a black guy instead of a white guy, even though their qualifications might be the same, because in his mind, the black person has now probably been punished so much by society that he's in fact owed a reward. Conversely, the white person has probably enjoyed so many privileges throughout their lives that this one punishment of not getting the job doesn't even begin to correct the situation. Additionally, because historically in the United States, white people as a group have oppressed black people as a group, it stands to reason that now white people as a group must pay reparations and reward black people as a group for their long-standing suffering. And no, I'm not making this up. This is actually what goes on in the minds of social justice warriors. But the problem with this is that on a societal level, justice, i.e. rewards and punishments, can never lead to equality. These are two opposing ideas. Either people are equal and we treat them the same way regardless of their skin color, orientation, or gender, or we try to hold groups accountable for wrongs they have committed in the past. Trying to artificially prop up members of the minority group while artificially pushing down members of the majority group goes completely against the concept of equality by, you not treating these groups equally. Either you have social justice initiatives where you pigeonhole people with labels like black, white, gay, or straight, attempting to correct for perceived injustices, or you treat everybody the same equally with human decency. Those are two very different concepts, and we have to pick one or the other. And considering that I am strongly against group identity politics, and that I really do believe everyone should be treated the same, I am very much in favor of equality. And if you're at all familiar with history or politics, and you're thinking to yourself that a lot of these social justice beliefs sound kind of familiar, well, they should. Social justice is at its very core a Marxist ideology. And I know I'm on the right, but I'm not some crazy right-winger accusing everybody of being a dirty commie, even though some of these people, really, they are dirty commies. But this whole story of group identity and oppressor versus oppressed is entirely in keeping with the historical interpretation found in the Communist Manifesto. If you haven't yet read the Communist Manifesto, I really recommend you do. It's a short read. It shouldn't take you longer than about 15 minutes. You can find it for free online, and it'll give you so much insight into how these people think. While Marx lamented about the injustices of the bourgeoisie, the SJWs complain about the patriarchy. They are two sides of the same oppressive coin. Of course, what these similarities mean is that the same arguments of liberty and individualism that can be used to debunk the Marxist worldview can also be used against the social justice worldview. So I hope this video was a helpful deconstruction of what I think are some of the biggest problems with social justice. But before I go,